Hello, y'all. K-Dub here, and in this episode of Buddhism 200, we're going to talk about friendships and relationships. Friendship is considered one of the foundations of a Buddhist practice, and we'll actually talk about that in a little bit. And it's also a foundation for of our religious practice as well. Having solid friendships is considered to be a buffer against suicide. Yeah, I picked that example for a reason because I'm in suicide prevention. Take that with a grain of salt, everyone. Let's get the party started here. Spiritual friends. It doesn't even need to be Buddhism. It could be your own particular religion. What do we look for in a spiritual friend? Someone that guides us and reminds us of our spiritual path. I apologize for the copy paste errors here, but I'll read through it and it should be pretty clear. It says in the Samyutta Nikaya 45:2, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to say they can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. In this sutta, there's a little bit of context here. Before this is said, the Venerable Ananda says to the Buddha, hey, you know what? Admirable friendship is half of the holy life. And that's when the Buddha said, hey, now it's the whole of the holy life. We're having these admirable friendships, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie. And it sort of makes sense, right? You know, you surround yourself with people that have similar goals, who follow similar methods, and that creates sort of like a sense of community, right? And so it's a little bit of extra motivation to continue along the path because pretty much everyone else is. And more specifically here, it's pursue the Noble Eightfold Path, which is, once someone reaches the pinnacle of that path, that's awakening, that's enlightenment, that's freedom from dukkha. So it's considered to be such a noble goal. And so having these admirable friends reading that assist us in going toward that noble goal, if you practice Buddhism, is invaluable. You can't even calculate it. But it doesn't really stop there. More about spiritual friends. In the Anguttara Nikaya 171, and you can find this in the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's complete translation of the Anguttara Nikaya on page 101. It states, monks, I do not see even a single thing that so causes unarisen wholesome qualities to arise and arisen unwholesome qualities to decline as good friendship. For one with good friends, unarisen wholesome qualities arise, and arisen unwholesome qualities decline. And so remember, sort of unwholesome qualities, those are the things that are rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. The three big roots of unwholesome actions, thoughts, uh, and speech. And then we have the other side. So wholesome qualities, rooted in generosity, rooted in goodwill, rooted in wisdom. So surrounding ourselves with these good friends, and these are the friends that sort of follow this similar path. They can actually create an environment where unarisen wholesome qualities are probably more likely to arise and arisen unwholesome qualities to decline. It increases sort of that probability. Because there's sort of that environment, right? And it's like there's a little bit of pressure, let's keep those wholesome qualities going. Let's keep those unwholesome qualities, to the side because we don't want to sort of ruin this environment that we've created. So it's really good for community building. And the Dhammapada also has some guidelines. There's almost like a whole chapter on this. But I took verses 78 and 76. So, verse 78, do not associate with evil companions. Do not seek the fellowship of the vile. Associate with the good friends. Good friends, right here. Seek the fellowship of noblemen. So, same basic thing. We don't want those people that are engaging in unwholesome uh, actions, unwholesome thoughts, unwholesome speech. That doesn't help lead us toward the goal. It might, help us practice patience and maybe try and, say, hey, the Dharma says we shouldn't be saying those things. Could probably lead to a lot of trouble. And by association, you could be viewed a lot differently. So that's something to take into consideration as well. So associating with the good friends, we already know what those good friends are. They bring out the wholesome qualities of us and reduce the unwholesome qualities. Seek the fellowship of noble men. So that's being applied from sort of a Buddhist context. It could be the noble men or women in your religious community. I think we should say noble people because I'm not really a big fan of men when it comes to the Buddhist text because it's really slanted toward men, and that was like a social and cultural thing for these texts. So I'm not really fond of it because it's 2022. We're in the United States. Women can do anything they basically want, and that includes a Buddhist practice in working toward enlightenment. As a matter of fact, I think women are awesome candidates for enlightenment in general. And then verse 76, should one find a person, I'm not going to say just man because it could be a woman. It could be anyone. It could be a transgender female. It doesn't even matter. It could be it could be just a human being. Should one find a person, I'm going to say that, who points out faults and who reproves, let them follow such a wise and sagacious person as one would a guide to hidden treasure. It is always better and never worse to cultivate such an association. And so, someone who reproves is someone who criticizes, but it's got to be constructive. It cannot be said in a way that makes a person defensive because then they're not going to be open to that possibility of improving or change. So I've noticed that you've been doing this, that, or the other, and you said your goal is this, that, or the other. So it's sort of confusing. Is there something going on? Because it doesn't seem like you're working toward your goal. Something like that. Not like, oh my gosh, that's wrong according to Dharma. You're gonna you're gonna burn in one of the 108. You're gonna go to one of the 108 Buddhist hells. Yeah, that's not actually all that motivating, and it might put the person in defensive mode because they might say, "Well, I don't believe in 108 hells of Buddhism." And then, you get into you get into an argument instead of a discussion, and arguments sometimes do not end well. I'm going to get back to Sariputta and Moggallana in a little bit, actually. How about our non-spiritual friends? So friends that are maybe outside our religious circle or are spiritual but not religious. What do we look for there? Well, the Anguttara Nikaya 735 has some guidelines for that. And they're not rules, they're guidelines. I think that's very important to say. We can ignore these guidelines and pick whatever friends we want, but these are pretty decent guidelines, in my opinion. So maybe we might want to be mindful and heedful of this. Monks, a friend endowed with 7 qualities is worth associating with. Which 7? They give what is hard to give. They do what is hard to do. They endure what is hard to endure. They reveal their secrets to you. They keep your secrets. When misfortunes strike, they don't abandon you. When you're down and out, they don't look down on you. A friend endowed with these 7 qualities is worth associating with. Of course, since we're K-Dub, we're trying to be inclusive and include everyone. So I don't go he. I say they. To include as many people as possible. All right, so let's go through these very quickly. They give what is hard to give. This could be just advice. And you could say this of a romantic partner too. Does your romantic partner give you sometimes advice that you really need, and it's very hard to give that? Just as an example, it's not just that. Do they do what is hard to do? Maybe they work overtime so that you can afford stuff. Could be something like that. That could also be hard to give, the overtime because we do tend to like to have our own time. Uh, they endure what is hard to endure. Life throws them curveballs, and they say, "Okay, I'm going to keep trying to power through this and work toward my goals." They reveal their secrets to you, so they trust you enough where they will share their secrets, knowing that you will keep them secret. They keep your secrets, so it's lock and key with that mouth and typing and writing. When misfortunes strike, they don't abandon you. Pretty straightforward. Every now and again, life throws a curveball, and We sort of get a little bit unfortunate. But that friend sticks around, or that romantic partner sticks around. When you're down and out, they don't look down on you. Now, this one, I think this one's critical. So, when we look down upon people, generally we feel what is called pity on that person. So, we view ourselves sort of as in a superior position. I'm not like that. I don't have those feelings because I'm not in that situation. Wow, I feel awful for this person um, because I'm not experiencing what they're experiencing. Or maybe I have the answer to their problem or whatever the situation may be. But when we look at someone through a compassionate lens, that's not relevant. We just see a living being who's suffering, and there's that sort of wholesome intention of wanting to reduce that dukkha if at all possible. And it could be as just as simple as buying someone a meal. That could go a long ways toward reducing that person's suffering for that time. Although I wouldn't suggest that's a long term. But definitely, for that particular day, for example, that does reduce their suffering. But there needs to be more done if that's the particular situation. Um, I often think about the people that are staying in shelters or choose not to stay in shelters, so they're living under bridges. Those type of individuals, it's like I I bring them into my apartment, but at the same time, there's just one thing that I don't have for that particular person, and that is trust that they won't take things, that they will take advantage of my generosity, maybe not by taking things, but just keep going over and over again instead of trying to find a long-term solution. So of course, these are guidelines, and everything that I say is a guideline. You can ignore what I say and just go about your business and live your life the way you want, as long as you're not intentionally going around hurting people or going around slaughtering, animals yourself. Okay, that's cool. As long as you're trying to reduce the amount of dukkha that you're dealing out to others, intentional or not, or just trying to reduce others suffering. Just don't add to it, basically. So now we have to visit this wise versus unwise thing again. So is this association guiding us to our goals, whether it's spiritual or not? Is this association enabling unwise behaviors? Addiction's a big one. So you may have friends, quote unquote, that are into the same drug as you, or maybe it's drinking. You have a bunch of drinking buddies. But once it gets to the addiction stage, are we enabling those unwise behaviors? And how many parts of the person's life is that affecting? And at that point, it becomes very difficult to discern because it's like I just need a drink to function. So very difficult, but something to keep in mind. It, in this association, does the other person criticize compassionately? Circle, underline, bold compassionately there when we make mistakes or if we're not working toward our goals necessarily. So someone could compassionately say, "Hey, K Dub, I've noticed that you're playing a lot of games. Do you think that's actually working? That's working you toward enlightenment?" And I'd probably have my defenses up a little bit and say, "Well, I'm not a monk. I'm a layperson, and I fully acknowledge that I play a lot of games. But at the same time, since I am not a monk, it doesn't mean I have to stop." And so I get pretty defensive about that. But at the same time, there's valid points on both sides of those. I don't remember. Is this? Yeah, that's the end. So let's go back to Sariputta and Moggallana, sort of like the pinnacle of friendship here. So Sariputta and Moggallana are two individuals that the Buddha eventually encounters and allows into his sort of ministry. But Sariputta and Moggallana are two friends. They're lifelong friends, basically. And they say, okay, we're done with this household life thing. Let's go into the forest and seek, the holy goal. which was very common during that time. You know, the Buddha left his wife and child to sort of find the middle way. And, at that time, that was considered to be pretty admirable because that's a very uncomfortable lifestyle living out in the woods and very dangerous at times. And trying to find that holy goal was considered like the pinnacle of humanity at this time in this culture. And so Sariputta and Moggallana say, enough of this. So they go ahead and they find a teacher out in the woods that they're okay with. But Sariputta, he's sort of traveling around, and someone asks Sariputta, have you by any chance met the Blessed One? And he says, who's that? And so he goes ahead, he listens to a Dharma talk, a sermon, so to speak, uh, from the Buddha. And it's like his eyes popped wide open, the light bulb went on, and the first stage of awakening, that of stream entry, occurred right there. And so Sariputta and Moggallana sort of made a pact that if that had happened, some one or the other found sort of a spiritual path that leads to the goal that they're looking for, that they would find each other and they would share that. So Sariputta is like, I gotta go find my friend Moggallana. And so he goes to find and finds Moggallana. Moggallana sees him coming from a distance, notices a lot of difference. Face is more serene, skin seems a little more golden. All those things that show up in the texts that show that the person had changed spiritually. And Sariputta goes to Moggallana and says, I saw this guy. They call him the Blessed One, the Tathagata, the Buddha, and this is what he taught. And the light bulb sort of goes on from Moggallana too, and says, "Yeah, we're done with this teacher. We're going to that one because that is the holy goal right there." And so they join the ministry of the Buddha, and they become two chief disciples of the Buddha. Sariputta was considered to be very close to being equal with the Buddha when it came to wisdom and discerning what the teachings meant. And Moggallana was sort of a master of psychic powers and meditation. And so it's like the pinnacle of friendship where someone realizes that they feel like they have found that sort of path and go back to their friend and say, "Hey, I can't keep this to myself. I need to tell you this." So that is the sort of the summary version of Sariputta and Moggallana and their friendship. All right, so that takes care of this episode. I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do in the next episode, so I do have a list of ideas. So we have Aging, Illness, and Death series, in which we'll go through those one at a time. The 31 Planes of Existence. I really would like to do that one at some point. Work and occupation, that's practical, so I might think about doing that. Then the 8 worldly conditions, I think that would probably be. So I'm thinking work, occupation, the 8 worldly conditions, aging, illness, and death, and then the 31 planes of existence. And then, maybe the 12 links of dependent origination if I feel ambitious, but if not, we'll just wrap it up. And then the series will be done and over with. And, hopefully it will come to fruition for others, and for their happiness. And I really don't care about my own happiness. My own happiness is on my own shoulders. So I'm hoping that sharing all of this does bring some semblance of understanding to others, as well as maybe some form of joy or happiness about learning about these things. So until the next episode, everyone take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.